Terra Mystica is arguably the chess of modern board games. There's complete information with no randomness to hide behind. And in this setting, step the giants, the brutes of TM. So giants are a very unique faction and require a different playstyle from the other factions. And I decided to make a strategy guide for giants because I think it's also a faction that newer players tend to really struggle with. And while Terra Mystica is a very satisfying game when your plans succeed, it also is very sink or swim, and no game sinks faster than a Giants game. When a Giants game starts going badly, it tends to go really badly. So in this guide, I'm going to talk about Giants play through the lens of 3 strategic principles, and hopefully those will help if you've been struggling with Giants. Hopefully this can help improve your game. So welcome to Guide to Giants by Mr. Fickles, presented by Zorus Inc. This guide will be in 3 parts. Right now we're looking at part 1 of the guide, how to play Giants. And honestly, this will be the biggest and most important piece. So this will be the longest video, and this is the one you'll primarily want to focus on if you're a new player. In part 2, we'll get to standard openings, color matchups, a couple other nuances. And then in part 3, we'll talk about alternative Giants openings, some of the real niche stuff like Temple Giants. What does that actually look like in practice? Again, if you're a new player, most of what you need is in this. I'd also recommend looking at the standard openings in part 2 of the video. I think that'll be pretty essential for you too. All right, on we go. So taking a look at the Giants board, based on what we can see here, everything about Giants look vanilla, right? So we see all the standard costs, all the standard incomes, we see the standard starting resources and the standard starting power. Now, all of what makes Giants unique comes based on their base ability and their stronghold. The base ability of Giants is that it takes 2 spades to convert any hex color to red. So basically they ignore the typical color wheel that determines whether a given color takes 1, 2, or 3 spades to convert it, and everything takes two digs. Now the other element is the stronghold. Now this is a special building because it comes with the orange button that you can use once per round to get those 2 digs to convert a hex of any color to red. So this is an essential building. You should think about Giants as being a faction that needs to open stronghold and needs to rely on that stronghold for expansion. And so we'll be unpacking here how these 2 simple features make Giants' playstyle wildly different. Here we are looking at base map for Terra Mystica. This is the most commonly played map and the one we'll be focusing on primarily in this guide. So let's put on our Giants goggles, and when we do so, it looks a little different. We see reds and non-reds, and the location of these reds is super critical for Giants, where they are and how to access them, which brings us to principle number 1. Get your reds. We have to get our native red hexes as Giants. Spending 2 spades to get 1 hex is so expensive for them that it's really, really important that we're getting those hexes that we don't have to spend any spades for. We don't have the luxury of using 1 dig here, 1 dig there, scattering our spades around to expand. Expansion is going to have to be fueled by using our stomps intelligently to get to native red hexes. These are the standard starting placements for Giants. We can call it center and east. This is D4, D7. And these tend to be the standard placements because that center 1 tends to be a spot that gets tons of power in round 1. And so it's very central and you can expand in multiple different directions from the center of the board. The one in the east is nice because, yes, it also sometimes gets power in neighbors, but it also gives you relatively easy access to some of those reds in the northeast of the board. These 2 placements also have a nice feature of it usually being pretty easy to connect through the north when you're starting here. When we're in our standard starting placements, there's one particular form of early digging to reds that's the dream on base map. It's this digging down through the middle, so either E6 and then one of F3, F4, or E7 and then F4. This is the dream. We get 2 stomps for 3 hexes, we set up an early town, and if you imagine us having that town now, look how easy we can access almost every single natural red on the board, right? So at that point, we've got amazing board control. We're going to be able to continue expanding easily. This is really appealing. Let's make sure we check for this opportunity first. Here's another example of finding a way to use our stomps to dig towards reds. That A9 red in the north is landlocked. We don't have easy access to it. So we could think about using 2 stomps to get to it, right? So using 2 stomps to get 3 hexes, much like we were talking about in the middle in our dream scenario. And we could think about this from different sides here. That red is buried. We don't have access to it. How can we use our stomps efficiently to unlock it? Digging towards reds like this also has the nice feature of setting up towns, right? Getting those 4 red hexes in a row makes it really easy to town up in those situations. Here's a common alternative pair of starting placements called double center. And this might be attractive if there's going to be lots of upgrading in the middle of the board. Maybe the east is empty to start the game. And so we could start double center and get a lot of power draw. Now, we might be worried about starting here because it feels like we could get stuck on one part of the board. So what really makes this pair of starting hexes attractive is if we can use our early stomps to cut through something like d5 with either directly d5 or e7, e8 or something like that to make sure that we're going to get easy access to those natural reds to the east. So that's an example of we want to be thinking in advance about how we're going to dig to reds, and double center is attractive essentially only if we know we're going to be able to dig through easily and get to those reds. And while we're on the topic of digging to reds, here's another, this is very weird and rare pair of starting placements, but it is possible when you feel like all the action is going to be on the west of the map. And you only want to do this if you see an opportunity to dig up through the middle of the board, right? So maybe yellow's on f3, and you're going to race them up to that red. And if you can dig through, now you have, again, excellent map control, and you have abilities to get to the northeast on 3 ship. You can town without a bridge, and you've gotten a lot of power along the way on both of those spots. So very rarely do you want to do it, but this is a good example where being able to dig to a red like this sort of makes a pair of starting placements like this viable. And then there's getting to reds by shipping to reds, right? So if we look at base map, we can see we have options in the north here from our standard placements. On 1 ship, we can get to a natural red. On 2 ship, we can get 2 more natural reds in the north. Or if we were in double center in the south, there's one available on 1 ship. And we talked about digging to reds, right? And so you could imagine getting to b5, maybe slogging our way there, first digging c4, then digging b5. Or you can increase your ship and get there directly, right? So increasing our ship gets us access to more hexes that let us then do 1 stomp for 2 hexes. So maybe we come at that A9 hex from the other side before. Another really nice one is once we're at 2 ship from our traditional placements, we stomp D3 to get the red there. And once we've built on that, look at this. In round 6, we're on 3 ship and we can stomp H1 and we're even getting to the corner red. So all of this comes down to expansion really being fueled by shipping. In certain situations we can dig to red, but even then a lot of our digging to red is contingent on us getting ship and getting it early. Giants need shipping. We don't typically think about putting a giant in a boat, but get a bigger boat. Giants need shipping, which brings us to strategic principle number 2. We talked about how opening stronghold is effectively essential for giants. And what does that come along with? That means we're going to be getting quite a bit of power income. We get 4 power per round with that. We're also getting spades, right? We'll have a giant stomp every single round, and those stomps will help us build out dwellings. So we'll have a lot of dwellings, and dwellings help us generate workers. This is what giants do well. This is the kind of income giants produce easily. Well, by omission, we should see we don't see priest income and we don't see coin income here. That's strategic principle number 2, hunt, coins, and priests. In many ways, Terra Mystica is a game of balance. The giants generate workers, power, and spades readily. They don't produce coins and priests, and we just established that one of our biggest needs is early ship increases. Well, what does that cost? Priests and coins. So not only are we not producing priests and coins, we desperately need priests and coins to increase our shipping so that we can expand early. So this is why this is such an important issue. So what do we do about it? So giants get a lot of power. Part of that's the 4 power income from the stronghold, but it also has to do with the fact that they have their traditional starting placements get a lot of leech in round 1, particularly because giants are going to a 3 value building, so they're even getting 3 for 2s. And the beauty of power is that it's a flexible resource. You should identify what your resource problems are and use your power to solve them. And for us, it's coins and priests here. So the way we want to use our power is to take 7 coin action and priest power action. These are the power actions that we're going to target with our early power in the game. Now notice what's not here. You don't see double dig. Don't dig with power early in a Giants game. It can often be tempting. Don't do it. The problem is, and NerdCube's been a really big advocate of that, it's not that it's an inherently bad thing, it's really the opportunity cost. You have a desperate need for coins and priests, and spending power on spades is power that wasn't spent on coins and priests, and that's the big issue. In fact, if you think about it, even if we aren't able to get the 7 coins power action, we often will prefer to have 6 coins than we would prefer to have a double dig for 1 more hex. So that's just straight converting power into coins without even taking a power action, and that's probably more attractive to us and better for us in round 1 than spending all that power on a double dig. Now if it's round 4 and we are flush in cash and have priests coming out of our ears, okay, and maybe it's dig scoring round, sure, we can maybe double dig in that rare circumstance. But in general, it's good to have the default habit of not double digging with giants and focusing on coins actions and priest actions. The other thing that then enables us to do is we actually can feel pretty comfortable discarding power and burning down to as few as 4 tokens. We don't need to save 6 tokens for any double digs. So if you have an opportunity to get an extra coins action by burning down to 5 or 4 kernels, you should definitely do that. Even though it might feel scary because you're in round 1 or 2 or something like that, it's often still worth it. The only concern is that if you're going to have a lot of power income later, you might not be able to take it all. However, it's probably worth it if you're going to be able to put that money to good use early in the game. So we're trying to solve our coin and priest problems. The other way to do it is to use pass scrolls. We really want to be looking for the coin scrolls and the priest scrolls early in the game to help us fuel our ship increases. And the final thing we'll consider here is using early towns to access those resources. One thing that's a little bit unique about giants is that it's quite easy for them to town in round 2. For a lot of factions, that's a little bit tricky. You kind of need things to break your way. If you want to, you can pretty easily town in round 2 as giants. And all you really require is you're going stronghold round 1. That means you have a stomp in round 1 and a stomp in round 2. And if you look at base map, there's quite a few ways for you to use 2 stomps and a bridge to form a town. So I'm showing you one example here through the middle where you stomp 2 hexes and you bridge to a red. And all you need to do then is do a trading post in round 2 to town up. And so this is also why, town scoring in round 2 is pretty attractive to giants, because it's easy for them to town in round 2 relative to how easy it is for other people. So here's another example of a town that on base map that takes 2 stomps and 1 bridge. This is another example, again, same thing, 2 stomps, 1 bridge, and then trading post, and you're towning in round 2. And here's another one. And while towns are a source of points, early in the game we should always think about towns in terms of what resources they can provide to us that we need. And what resources do we need? Coins and priests, baby. So what town gives us that? The ship town. So we can think about this as 4 points plus 2 points on our board from moving up, 4 coins and a priest. That is exactly what the doctor ordered early in the game. If we happen to be getting some source of priests on the side, we could take a coin town instead to fuel our ship increase. Very rarely will be a game where we happen to be getting priest called. Maybe we're towning in round 3 or something. maybe the 2-key town where you take 2 steps on each cult could make sense there, as long as we're getting a bunch of power income from moving up the cults, resources off the track, and we're able to help turn that into ship increases in other ways. Now, getting an early ship town is so valuable to giants that some people will just prioritize with their first 2 stomps just to make sure that they can town as early as possible to get that. So there's sort of a bit of a fork in the road at the beginning of the game for giants. Am I going to town as quickly as possible, or am I going to increase ship and start spreading around the board? Now, even if we're towning as quick as possible, we're digging towards reds to get that town. So either way, we're trying to meet our goals and follow our strategic priorities of getting to reds. Okay, it's time to talk about the elephant in the room. And it pains me to say it, but giants have a hard time scoring. And in a game where the faction that sort of ends the game with the most points wins, that is not an ideal feature, I think we could say. So why do I say that giants have a hard time scoring? Well, first let's start by thinking about endgame. Giants, because of this challenge of having to double dig everything, have a hard time winning network, right? Which if you win network, you get 18 points. They have a hard time winning network, particularly against the big network dogs like alchemists, engineers, cultist darklings in a lot of games, stronghold nomads, stronghold witches. In those matchups, they're almost certainly not going to be able to win network outright. And likewise, when thinking about cult scoring, they have a hard time doing well on the cults. They don't really have that option of saying, oh, okay, I'm going against other network factions, I'm going to focus on the cults. They'd have a hard time doing that because they have to open Stronghold, right? They're going to open Stronghold. They don't have good priest production. They don't have a good way to get priest to cult because they have to focus on ship increases. And so this is very limiting to their cult game. And so they're stuck a little bit between a rock and a hard place, being not great on network. They're okay and kind of bad on cults, maybe okay if they work hard at it. And so that then puts them a bit of a step behind. Further, there are a lot of factions that have sort of innate or inherent scoring. They have ways to score from their board, right? So that would be Darklings digging with priests for 2 points, Halflings getting points for digging, Witches getting 5 points from towns, Fakirs and Dwarves getting, points for carpet flights and tunnels respectively. Giants don't have any of that. They don't have any sort of internal way to generate points. What they can do is, if played effectively, they can start producing lots of stuff, but they're definitely at risk of not having good ways to turn that into points. Okay, so we have a giant scoring problem, and we're going to make up for our sort of disadvantages on some of those other dimensions by finding ways to score in the following ways. And so we'll go into this in a bit more detail, but at a high level, we want to make sure we can hit the track really hard. We're going to try to make sure we're getting on point scrolls for scoring. We really need point scrolls to be in the game. We're going to be smart about when and how we take favors that help us score, and we want, after, let's say, 1 early ship town, we want 2 late towns that will be high point towns. For example, a priest town, or an 8-point town that gives you a step on each cult, or even the 11-point town. Also, often our game plan will involve identifying a cult that will be neglected early, and we'll try to claim it in the mid game. So, and giants start with a step on fire and air, so often those will be the ones. But when I say neglected early, I mean there's no sort of cult reward in the first 3 rounds for this on this cult, and so other factions are probably ignoring it. And so when giants do finally have a spare priest, say in round 3, they can toss that priest to this cult that no one else is particularly interested in and sort of claim it. This is the one that I want to win this game, and just focus on that. And so when we get to end game, and I know this sounds unambitious in some ways, but realistically we can aim for something like 12 network points and 12 cult points, right? And by that I mean scraping out that first place on a neglected cult and squeezing out a couple third places. And of course, some games can go better than this, absolutely, right? Sometimes all these things break perfectly and you can totally dominate, but this is, I think, a very realistic direction to try to go. But this is all to say, Giants are not a faction that you can sort of blindly bid on and trust that you'll be able to find ways to score. Already in auction, you want to be starting to assess. You want to see the signs and the setup and the pass scrolls and the track that this is a good Giant setup for scoring. You want to be able to read the setup and see, okay, Giants can score. We sort of have solutions to our Giant scoring problem in this setup. And so let's talk through the features of the setup that we're looking for. So first, let's consider pass scrolls. Pass scrolls was on our list of ways to make up the points. Well, specifically, Giants really want to see the dwelling scroll, the stronghold scroll, and the shipping scroll. And if you think about it, we shouldn't be surprised by that, right? Because we said we open stronghold, we are stomping our little hearts out and building lots of dwellings early, and we're getting our ship up as quickly as possible. That means all three of these scrolls are going to be nice ways for us to score throughout the game. And again, Giants desperately want scoring in general, so they just, these three in particular are very good for them, but in general, more scoring scrolls is good for them because they have economy and they don't have easy ways to score points. So even the trading post scroll, for example, that being in the game, I would say is a good thing, even though they won't be able to hit it in the early rounds. Starting round 4, 5, 6, they're thrilled to be able to start landing on the scroll as one more source of points. What other scrolls do Giants like? Well, they're actually quite happy to have the temporary shipping scroll in the game, often referred to as temp ship, right? They need to expand. We know how important shipping is to them. They have a hard time paying for priests, acquiring priests and coins, and so temporary shipping can be a way of circumventing those needs a little bit. So they're happy for temp ship to be in the game. That helps expansion. We also know they need coins and priests. That's one of their big needs. They're happy to see those scrolls as well. The big one that they don't want to see is the dig scroll. The Giants do not want to see the dig scroll in the game, right? So they cannot use this scroll nearly as well as all the other factions. And because a given hex takes 2 spades for them to convert, getting 1 spade by itself is useless, right? Only if you're willing to pair that with a set of workers to be such that it is a double spade. Now it's usable. It's just this scroll is way, way better for all the other factions. So you don't want to see dig scroll in the game, and I would say the 3 scoring scrolls of dwelling, stronghold, and ship scoring are probably the 3 most critical, especially because we're thinking about our Giant scoring problem. If we can see all 3 of these scrolls in the game and we see the dig scroll out, we should be thinking Giants might be playable here. Let's think about the scoring track. So we said we want to hit the track really, really hard. Okay, so to do that, we need the flow of the track to fit the natural flow for Giants, right? And so we know in round 1, Giants want to build their strongholds. We'd love to see stronghold points round 1. We're also, dig scoring round 1's kind of interesting. That we know we're going to double dig round 1, and maybe only one other faction is going to have 2 spades round 1. So maybe that we're happy with that as well. In rounds 2 and 3, we want to be building out dwellings. We likely want a temple in one of those 2 rounds. And we're also, as mentioned previously, one of the factions that can town very easily in round 2 or 3. So we're happy to see those, right? This is where we're building out, grabbing a favor, maybe towning early for a ship town. These are the rounds where we want to be doing those things naturally. In 4, 5, 6, we really want to see trading post scoring. It's very, very important that there is trading post scoring later in the game. The Giants have a very clear natural flow of wanting to see stronghold early, dwellings, and then trading posts. And that flow is really, really critical. Other factions are a little bit more adaptable. They can live with different, build orders and such things. The Giants really want to see this. They're a little bit more dependent on a particular flow than some of the other factions. And so they really want to see a nice flow. So all factions would like to see a nice flow. It lends itself to scoring. Giants especially, because they're not as flexible and because they don't have good sources of points, they really want to see this on the track. Now, I want to put a couple other things out there. You see also for round 4, 5, 6, I've mentioned, sanctuary scoring might be a nice, since you probably want to be grabbing scoring favors. You're happy to see a sanctuary scoring later, and also late towns, right? Giants are a faction that can, pretty easily get to 3 towns, and so you could imagine popping 2 of those towns in around 5, for example, or around 6. And so you're also pretty happy to see a late town round. That said, to me, the most critical things are that you're seeing dwellings in round 2, 3, and that you're seeing TPs scoring in the 4, 5, 6. And if the TP scoring is in round 4 or 5, for example, seeing now a dwelling scoring right after that is also really juicy, right? You just built your TPs, now you have more dwellings in stock to build out. And for Giants, that's especially the case if they don't have a color neighbor in the game. They're native reds. There's more of them likely hanging out. Then a late dwelling round is another nice way for them to score off the track. So we've been talking about how to identify games where Giants have good avenues for scoring. I want to talk now about taking favors, right? So this is when you build a temple or sanctuary, you get an opportunity to take a favor. And for Giants, that's an opportunity to pick up a scoring tool, right? So they have a hard time scoring. This is their giant scoring problem. I can take a favor and get one of these tools for scoring, Earth 1, Water 1, or Air 1. And so, we do that by building temples and sanctuaries. The question is, how should we think about building those? When do we want to take those? Which ones do we want to prioritize? How should we think about that? So my advice on this matter is to think about favors from the perspective of reading the track, right? So we talk about reading the track on trying to score track points like we did on the previous slides. Here, I want you to think about reading the track even already in auction and listen to when it's telling you to take favors. Is there a clear flow here where there's natural moments to take up scoring favors that then will help you, score with the given building at the time where you wanted to build it anyway, right? You want to sort of listen to the track to what it's telling you. I sound like a crazy person, like you're listening to the spirits of Terra Mystica, but that's a little bit what I mean, right? We think about that for track scoring. We don't think about that sufficiently for favor scoring, in my opinion, or some people, I should say. So let's take a look, right? If we see a track that looks something like this, it feels very natural. What's the natural flow here for a scoring favor? Well, that seems like a good place to pick up Earth 1, right? We want to open a stronghold. It looks like we're about to build dwellings. So let's temple round 2, pick up Earth 1, and then try to score with that in the following round. And likewise, we can consider another track where the temple event is a little bit later. So what do we think about taking favored tiles in this situation? Well, again, we can use a similar kind of logic and say, all right, it looks like we're going to go stronghold, build dwellings round 2, and there's a natural spot here to pick up a scoring favor right before we're going to build trading posts. This feels like the track is telling us this is a good spot for a Water 1 type of game. Now, what do we think about this one? What do you think the track is telling us here, right? So what it looks like is we're going to be building our stronghold, spreading out dwellings, and then we're going to be building trading posts and then temple. So there's a couple possibilities here, right? On the one hand, we could temple. We've already built out a bunch of trading posts. We can now temple and score with Air 1 at that point. And now we'll just be scoring with the trading post sitting there on the pass. Additionally, because we just built a bunch of trading posts in the previous round, that also means we have dwellings back on our board, which means we're probably about to build a bunch of dwellings again. So this is a nice spot also to pick up Earth 1. And if both are available, we may even build 2 temples this round and pick up both. And so the same type of thinking can apply when we think about multiple places where we could take a favor. So using the same logic that we just laid out, we might think here, this might be a place where we temple for Earth 1, build out dwellings, sanctuary for Water 1, and build out trading posts. We can see a nice natural flow there. So getting used to reading the track in this way, not just for track scoring, but also for how to think about taking favors, I think is really useful. I want to return to this one that I showed you earlier, right? And now, what if we get to this temple and the Earth 1s are gone? Or perhaps we have rough finances, right? Perhaps we're not off to maybe the best start, or maybe the whole setup is very low cash. These are all situations where a fire 1 might be very reasonable here, right? So taking a fire 1 round 2 with this temple might help our coin problems, right? Now, particularly if we see this event later, then we think, okay, maybe I'm off to a little bit of a tough start. Maybe Earth 1's not available. Maybe there's just not that much money in the game, and I know money is one of my biggest problems as giants. Maybe I take Fire 1 in round 2, knowing that I can Sanctuary later and pick up a Water 1 before scoring a lot with trading posts, right? Now, this would be a very economic game, right? Giants in general are economic. Their biggest problem is scoring, in addition to coin and priest production. Now, we just make sure that we're going to be building a ton and going to be able to afford our ship increases, but we still have our game plan for scoring later. This could be a really fun game plan for giants. Now, there's another school of thought with respect to giants, and that is, you're opening, with your stronghold round 1. As we've talked about, that means you're producing power workers and digs. And let's say for a second that you've, in the first round or 2 combined, you've gotten a coins action, power action, and you've landed on the 6 coin scroll. So you're actually fairly flush with resources. We still have our giant scoring problem, right? So we are off to a good start. And now what do we see when we read the track here, right? We could very, reasonably read this track as we're going to build stronghold. We're going to do, a couple dwellings in round 2, then we'll up our ship and get another 3 down round 3, and then we'll plan to build out, trading post round 4. We can score on all that. That flow looks wonderful for giants. Well, there's a school of thought that what we should actually do is treat round 2 like it's a temple round. Basically ignore the fact that that's a dwelling round and just grab Earth 1 while we can. If Earth 1's available in round 2, just muscle it out. The scoring need is too great for giants. We have a giant scoring problem. If you open stronghold and you have any chance to get temple round 2 for Earth 1, do it. That's sort of a school of thought. I don't adhere to that strictly. I think this example that I'm showing you, I think sometimes that's a mistake and people sort of bully themselves into doing it. I think in this case it's really interesting, right? You can just see that, okay, I can build out the following round. It's also a dwelling round, and anytime you see the same event back to back, it gives you a bit of optionality. Yes, you can use both, but you can also skip one planning to hit the other one hard. So this is, I think, is a good example where you could just choose to muscle out a round 2 Earth 1, knowing that you can then still hit dwellings pretty hard the following round. And not only that, templing round 2 solves what other need of ours? Priests, right? We're short on coins and priests, and so yes, we're getting the scoring tool that we desperately need. We're also getting a sort of source of priests. We're going to be really looking for continuing to, find access to coins to feed our shipping. That will help us expand in that dwelling round, and then, we can hit the trading post round hard. And we have the option then of, in a trading post round there, depending on how resource rich we are, we can just build out trading posts, or we can trading post, do another temple for, water 1, for example, and then continue to build trading posts out in that round, right? So we can go different ways, or if we're resource tight at that point, because we went Earth 1 round 2, we can just build trading posts. So if you can see a natural flow to the track and you can see how giants could pick up scoring favors without having to break stride, this is likely going to be a really fun game for giants. If you see those scoring pass scrolls in the game, giants are really strong. Let's say they don't have a color neighbor. All of a sudden they're super playable and probably really, really fun. On the other hand, the downside is really low. If the scoring scrolls aren't in the game, if the track looks clunky for them, you should be pretty wary. You want to make sure you have a pretty big point cushion, and how big we'll come back to in the next part of the guide. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Oi, Fickles. I thought giants were a disruptive faction. I was expecting the strategic principles to be like, first do this, then do that, and then kick them in the crotch. And none of the principles you're going through are like, you know, stomping on plebeians and crushing skulls and, driving over peons in my monster truck. So what's up with that? All right, my belligerent friend, now we can consider disrupting others. But there's a reason we've been talking about those three principles first. You can win a Giants game by nailing those three principles and not being disruptive. You absolutely cannot win if you fail in those principles but are successfully disruptive. So Giants look tough and mean on the outside, but they're actually very sensitive creatures, right? We have to make sure that we take care of the needs of the Giants first before we think about burning other people's houses down. So when the decisions between doing something that helps us, like getting to our natural reds, and sort of going out of our way to stomp a hex to make someone else mad, we want to make sure we're erring on the side of helping ourselves. So in general, I would suggest first practicing those principles we've been discussing and then work on developing the secondary skills of disruption instead of vice versa. Why is it exactly that Giants are considered a disruptive faction? Well, it goes back to their bookability. Any color besides red takes 2 spades to convert. And so that means they have a lot of discretion about which directions and which hexes they want to take. Further, we're going to be opening Stronghold, right? So that means they also right away have a stomp every round. Now, because native hexes are so valuable to their opponents, they can use their discretion to target those hexes. However, let's keep in mind that stomps are a scarce resource. You're building a stronghold in round 1. That means you get to 6 stomps in the game. 6. That's not a ton. And what you should start doing is actually allocating those, right? You start thinking, okay, I'm going to need 2 stomps to finish this town. I need a stomp over here to open that hex, a stomp over here to open that part of the board, and I'll need 2 stomps here to finish that town. And next thing you know, they're all accounted for, right? So it's not exactly something that we can willy-nilly throw around just by focusing on disrupting other players. So what does smart disruption look like? Okay, so I think the way we should think about it is on the margin, we want to stomp in a direction that mucks up opponent expansion, cuts connection of a network competitor, creates a cascade of hindrances, and destroys a town or destroys a town. I'll return to the first two, but what I mean by cascade of hindrances is, let's say we take a hex that a particular opponent wanted to complete their town. And because we took that hex, they now have to triple dig this other hex because it's the last one available to them. And that was a hex that a third opponent really wanted. And now that third opponent's connections cut, and now they're going to start competing on cults, and that's bad news for the fourth faction. That's what I mean by creates a cascade of hindrances, is there's going to be trickle-on effects of a particular stomp that causes other players to start fighting with each other more. Let's look at another example, though. So looking at the giant starting placements, right? So this D4, D7, center and east, standard placements. What does smart disruption look like? So I think a really common spot to think about disrupting, and I think if you're new to the game, again, first learn those 3 principles. When you want to start thinking about disruption on base map, I would probably focus my attention here. This is a really valuable spot on the board because it's often an avenue of connection from the west to the east. So often factions that are starting west and east need to decide, am I going to connect through the north or connect through the south? And one thing Giants can do to make people's life difficult is cut off the northern pass, right? If they're digging B5, for example, in the green, now they have a nice town spot there, and it's very difficult for anyone to cut through there. And what then happens is factions fight, the other factions fight each other like crazy to connect through the south. And so this is and the reason this is sort of smart is it's also an opportunity to unlock a buried red, that A9 red, by you're both blocking other people, you're going to cause them to fight in the south, and you're unlocking a red and setting up a town, right? So I consider this smart disruption. This is a smart spot that you could, depending on who you're playing, increase ship and target one of these hexes and try to get there such that you're getting in their way, but also setting yourself up nicely there. Let's think about another example of sort of hindering expansion. So we see black on E5 here. Another example would be if Giants round 1 this e5, they look like they want to go to 2-ship and hit some of those blacks, right, on 2-ship. Well, we could, as giants in round 1, increase our shipping, and we could stomp on b3, right? So we could use that stomp on b3, build on a6. We're very happy to get 2 hexes for 1 stomp, but we've also now broken the chain for that black faction. Now, it's very difficult for them to get north now, where on 2-ship they had this nice hop, hop, hop. Now all of a sudden, how are they even getting north? Now they need 3-ship, and they still have to dig a brown, right? Like, that's now all of a sudden a pain. So with one sort of slight shift in our focus, we've now made their life difficult. But still, we're getting 2 hexes for 1 dig, right? So we're still quite happy for our own efficiency in that circumstance. Now let's think about a case where we're double center and we see green here, right? So, for multiple reasons, this would be an example. We absolutely have to block middle here. So first of all, it's way too good for green to let them dig gray and blue and get a native green, right? That's that dream scenario. It's much like our dream scenario for giants to cut down through the middle. So it would be amazing for green to cut up through there. So we want to break up that town. Additionally, it gives us that open access to the east, right? Now we have access to d6, d7 on 1 chip. That's good for us anyway. So we definitely want to be breaking up that green, green trying to sneak up around us there. We want to make sure that we're blocking that town and opening access to ourselves. Okay, what do we think about this one? So now we see black is e5, e10. We see black in the east. We've got our round 1 stomp. And we're looking at that e10 black, and we say, wow, they're being a little cheeky here, right? Wow, it sure is tempting to use our stomp round 1 to just break black's connection, right? This is disruptive giants play. And not only do we stomp on it, we say in your face, and we pat ourselves on the back, and we put a little party hat on our giant head and blow our little kazoo or whatever that is. So we feel amazing. That feels so good to act dominantly towards another individual such that it makes us feel good about ourselves. That's wonderful. However, it didn't open up much expansion for us, right? We're not really heading towards anything by hitting d8. And can't we just as easily cut their connection by getting to our favorite little blocking spot in the north there? If we take those hexes, particularly b5, black's connection is cut anyway, right? We don't really need to do it at d8, and that's going to help us set up a town. It's going to help us reach that buried a9 red. This seems like a much more appealing way to disrupt rather than feeling like, oh, let's just hit them at d8 right out of the gate. Furthermore, did we even check? Holy moly, maybe we can have our dream here. We got so excited to punch somebody in the face in the east that it's possible that black is focusing on going 2-ship. Maybe if we hit e6 before they get there, we can actually have our dream scenario of getting to that g2 red. That is way better than caring about, oh, we can't let black connect, right? That's so good for us that even if black ends up connecting, that might still, that's going to really, really be good for us. We're going to get tons of native reds in that scenario. So let's make sure we're doing what's best for us before we focus on punching other people in the face. But our top priority is to play efficiently and find ways to score. We don't want to hurt ourselves to take an opponent's hex. That's just a gift to the other 2 players. And sometimes those players will even encourage you, right? They of course they want you to do something costly to you to hurt one of their opponents. So they'll maybe try to egg you on. Stick to the plan, do what's best for you, and only engage in smart disruption, and we'll be in a better place. But we have one more weapon that we haven't discussed yet on this front. The fear of the stomp. Okay, so there's the actual stomp of taking someone's hex, but then there's also the fear that other players have that you'll take their hex, and out of that fear, they'll do inefficient things. That's the power of the fear of the stomp coming to a theater near you. So in many ways, the fear of the stomp is as big a weapon as the stomp itself, right? So we want opponents to take inefficient actions because they're worried that we're going to stomp their hex, right? We want them sitting there fretting, concerned about what we're going to do. So have you ever been in a game where nomads are in and you kind of see what their opening is going to be? You're reading the track in an auction. You're just like, okay, this looks like, probably temple for earth one or fire one, maybe a single dig or an early pass for double dig. And so you're sitting there, everyone's got their game plans going in round one, and all of a sudden they open stronghold unexpectedly. And everybody starts squeezing their butt cheeks and holding their breath. Where are they going? None of us were expecting this. Where are they going to do that sandstorm? That's what happens when giants increase their shipping. Giants with shipping makes everybody squeeze their butt cheeks and get really nervous about what's about to happen next. Now all of a sudden they feel like they have to grab certain hexes before they wanted to. They wanted to, build certain buildings in rounds they didn't want to have to do them, right? And that's the fear of the stomp. That's what shipping increase does. It starts giving you access to all these places, and all of a sudden they feel constantly threatened, which causes them to make bad choices. Now, there is one sort of weird symptom of the fear of the stomp, which is that in round one, opponents will dig and build all the hexes by giants in round one. Okay, so I'll show you what I mean by that in a second, but you feel like you have space and all of a sudden you're completely surrounded in some sense. Okay, if that happens, don't panic, keep the faith, and the Terra Mystica gods will reward you. And remember, a great design feature of Terra Mystica is that they are feeding you power as they try to protect their hexes, as they kind of quote unquote are cutting you off. By building next to you, they're feeding you lots and lots of power, and you can turn that into expansion in other ways. So let's take a look at this to illustrate. So let's say we're on the big building scroll, we're on D4. This looks nice, right? We've got some different directions we can go here with our stomping. So we upgrade to a trading post, and now it's blue's turn. Oh, okay, interesting. They're gonna take C3, and next thing we know, black takes that hex. Wow, in the blink of an eye, we feel a bit suffocated. Okay, so this is what I mean by all of a sudden they're worried about us going stronghold and stomping those hexes that they want, so they immediately dig and build them. So this can feel demoralizing in some sense, but I want you to kind of keep the bigger picture in mind, right? So let's follow this through. What does this end up looking like? So all right, so now gray upgrades. What do? It's our turn again. How about we take the priest power action, right? We know that's one of our needs. We're getting tons of power here, right? So we're, already have gotten 6 power in leech from other people. Now, blue's upgrading, black's upgrading, gray's upgrading. It's our turn again. Now we can go stronghold. And now we're getting, even more power. They're going temple around us. Gray's doing something. It's our turn again. I think at this point we're at like 18 leech or something like that. And we can take the coins action, right? So, but we haven't stomped other people's hexes, but because we've gotten so much power, we're able to address right? We want to hunt priest and coins. We've taken priest and coins. We're at stronghold. Well, what can we do? Now we can very easily just pay for a ship increase round one, and we can start to expand using that shipping. So maybe we stomp on that B3 hex that was black, and now we're able to build on it, and we have another worker from our scroll that we started on, and we can build. We have our one ship. We can build on D6 or A6 now, and so all of a sudden this starts looking pretty darn good. Or perhaps we use our ship to stomp on that gray C2. So we could stomp there and build. We have our one ship. Let's also build on D6. So we have our nice opening where we've got 2 new dwellings. And look what this does for us in round 2. We have our ship. We did a permanent ship increase, which is really nice as opposed to being on temp ship. So now in round 2, we have an option. We could stomp D3 to get to E3, right? So that's 1 stomp for 2 hexes. We also have stomping B3 to get to A6, right? So in one fell swoop, we're starting to give ourselves all these opportunities to pretty efficiently get to other reds. One more option after increasing our shipping would be building D6, and we could stomp C4 and build there. And now also, if you're worried about connection, it's looking exceedingly likely like we're going to connect now as well, in addition to perhaps cutting off mermaids there and working towards that A9. This looks like another pretty attractive option for us. All right, we're ready to crush it as giants. All we have to do is follow our strategic principles of get our reds, hunt priests and coins, engage and solve our giant scoring problem. Along the way, we've touched on starting placements, how to use our resources, what pass scrolls we want to see in the setup, and a couple other related factors. We closed by talking about smart disruption. Yes, giants are a disruptive faction, but we shouldn't do it in a way that compromises us on our strategic principles. In part 2, we'll open with standard openings for giants. I would recommend that piece in particular for newer players, and then we'll get into some more nuanced things like the fjords map, landscape, and particulars of color matchups. In part 3 of the guide, we'll talk about alternative weird giants openings, kind of off the beaten path ways to play giants, and we'll do an analysis of that. Thus ends part 1 of our Giants Guide. I want to say a big thank you to Jekyll03, Nerdcube, and Zoris who gave me feedback and support on the guide.
Thanks for watching and see you in part 2.